Welcome to the Immune Edit. I'm Dr. Doug Jones. If your immune system feels like the enemy, or you're just tired of not feeling like yourself, this space is for you. Welcome back. It's exciting to be here. I'm so excited. I have another guest with me today. Excited to let him introduce himself. But Gary, before you do, I really want to get to your introduction, but I literally just got off the phone and it's not a rare sighting, but it was like a rare event. And you tell me if you can identify with this, but I actually spoke to a human from an insurance company.
How many buttons did it take?
That's it, right? It took so many buttons and so much time, but I actually spoke to a human from an insurance company. And guess what? We had a good conversation. I mean, it was a pharmacist with an insurance company who was obviously denying medication. But when we could actually have some dialogue together and I could understand their points and I could explain the history of the patient a little better, we came to an understanding and actually solved the problem in 10 minutes. Like 10 minutes, it was done. We both created a solution to get the patient access to the medication they needed, something they were happy with, something I was happy with. And it was so refreshing because my world consists of the ongoing daily fight against auto denials from AI-driven insurance machines to delay and deny care. And, they don't have access. And so, sorry, I just had to before jumping in, I had to share this experience because I'm so excited that I actually got to speak to a human at an insurance company. Have you ever, what's your experience?
I think it speaks to the whole picture of everything that's going on. Is once we actually talk about these things, people make a lot more sense. We if we can get more people in the room together.
But also, how sad is it that it's an exciting day when I got to speak to a human from an insurance company? How low are our standards now?
I've always said that, I wish some of these hospitals would take all their money from the billboards and the TV ads that I don't think have moved any patients into the hospital system and just put it into human being answering the phone. Yeah. I think that's marketing enough, right?
I know, right?
I mean, can you imagine calling up the hospital and being like, I spoke to a person, like a real person immediately. Yeah. I would tell everybody about that hospital.
Agreed. Yeah. Well, hey, thanks for indulging me. I want the audience to know who the mystery voice is that's on the podcast today. Gary, we met in person, about 5-6 months ago?
I guess so, yeah.
The first time kind of met through social media, and then got to meet, was like last November or something. And really enjoyed our conversation there. So I'm really excited to have you on today. But why don't you introduce yourself so our audience knows who you are, where you are, and what you're about.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I've admired all the things you're saying and doing for such a long time that it's great to be here. So I'm Gary Soffer. I'm a pediatric allergist and immunologist. I'm also an integrative medicine physician, and we'll talk about what that means, I'm sure, throughout the conversation. But I've done 2 separate fellowships, one in allergy immunology and one in integrative medicine. I'm an associate professor at the Yale School of Medicine, where I'm also the associate program director of the pediatric residency program. So medical education and communication is incredibly important to me. I went to medical school in Israel, and I did all of my pediatric and allergy immunology training at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. So jumped around a lot, and before that, I had a whole career in the music business, which is what most people want to talk to me about.
Yeah, now my interest is piqued. When you say music business, what do you mean?
I worked for Atlantic Records, which is like one of the big famous record companies helping to scout bands.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Why did you leave?
Why did I leave and go into medicine is the real question.
Yeah, why did you do that?
I mean, the real earnest answer was I had a boss who was very involved in, a lot of social justice work and a lot of, um, meaningful activities with his life that were outside of the music business. And I just found myself more drawn to doing that work than the actual music business. And so
Awesome.
eventually I found my path here.
That's great. Um, well, we're glad to have you. And, I admire what you're doing on social media and the impact that you're making in the world of allergy. Um, Love the voice that you're putting out there. And uh, in the world of misinformation, it's always nice to rub shoulders with people that are trying to dispel myths and I always say bring balance back to the force. And I think you're one of those people, and look forward to our conversation today. Um, Talk to me about. So obviously, it's great. You're at Yale. I think it's great that they allow you to do social media like this because I know some academic centers don't allow for that, and so it's great that you're able to put forward your voice and also be involved in the academic center setting. Did you get any pushback from that?
No, I mean, the first and only text that I've gotten happened last week, which was just asking me to put my opinions are my own on the bottom of my
Yeah.
bio. And that's as far as it's gone.
Okay. Cool. Well, I will say at the end of this show, there we always have that disclaimer, so hopefully we got you covered there too.
Perfect.
Um, Awesome. So why don't you tell me what's kind of your approach to patients? You've done a couple of fellowships, one in allergy immunology, one in integrative medicine. What kind of led you down that path? I always like to know what motivates people and what's motivated people to take the path that they've taken, because I think there's a lot to learn there. But tell me your story that way.
Yeah, my story goes back pretty far. I've been interested in integrative medicine long before I thought I was going to be a doctor, long before I thought I would go into medicine. Really, like when I was 5 years old, I started meditating in a Taekwondo class, and that just became a tool that was so important to my life and just showed up in different ways. And so when I eventually decided I wanted to go to medical school, I knew those pieces were going to be a part of patient care just because it had had such a profound impact on me. Ultimately, what my goal is shared with most people is like, how do I get the patient to feel better? But I think
Mhm.
what I'm looking at is a little bit more broad than what medication can I give a patient to treat their symptom, but really how do I get this human being in front of me to feel better, to feel improved?
Yeah.
Because we know that medication can improve symptoms, but doesn't always improve the patient. My goal is always to be as least invasive as possible. And so, where I pull from the integrative medicine modalities is there are so many interventions within that world that are just non invasive, whether they're yoga or meditation or nutrition or just a good night's sleep. I always say if meditation was a pill, every doctor would prescribe it.
Yeah.
Um, and that's the truth.
It is. That's awesome. I haven't done a formal integrative medicine fellowship or any formal training, but several years ago, I was actually struggling with my own health issues. And I think this is why you and I resonate because we actually both kind of took this pathway. But several years ago, I was dealing with some of my own health issues. And I was, things were starting to stack. And I was actually not getting the answers that I was wanting from traditional medicine, and it was a struggle. There was fragmentation. Uh, Things weren't making sense, and really, long story short, I got into a type of therapy that I actually didn't know anything about to start with, and when I went into it, I actually did not want any preconceived ideas on it. Um, but once I did the therapy, it had such a profound effect on me. I actually knew it wasn't placebo because I had no preconceived notion of it. Like I intentionally didn't know anything about it, nor what to even expect. and the outcomes that was happening, I didn't expect. Um, but it piqued my interest, and I thought, wait a minute, I wouldn't have believed this if it didn't happen to me. And so I started my brain wanted to understand the science of it. And so I started studying and studying, and it took me down a path where I actually read three different integrative and functional medicine textbooks just to try and understand me and what had happened to me. And it was fascinating, but through the process of that, gained very much an appreciation for those that make integrative approach part of what they do. Um, so that's a little bit of my background on it. But what I found also in the process was there's a lot of great concepts, but there's also a lot of use of unvalidated tests, over promotion perhaps of supplements without any evidence behind them. I see a lot of them online almost creating distrust with the medical community. But I do think there's a lot of greatness to integrative medicine. And I think where I gravitated to you is I think you have that nice balance of being able to maintain evidence-based medicine with that integrative approach. What's kind of been your experience? Do you have a different view, similar views, or what's kind of been
Yeah,
your experience with that?
I think it's important to start with some really clear definitions. Okay, and I want to distinguish also between integrative medicine and functional medicine because they're actually used synonymously, but they're not. They're not at all. I think the first definition that we use for integrative medicine comes from the NIH. So the NIH, which is our important research organization within the government, the NIH has a branch for integrative health. And they define integrative medicine as really the coordination of complementary practices and conventional care. So it's not actually the interventions themselves, but it's the communication that we're having, which I think allows everybody to sort of practice integratively in some way or another, because it's really just about that open communication between patient and physician. And then we bring in those complementary interventions. So integrative medicine is very much a wisdom-based practice, right? So we may not have a ton of evidence, but there's often a rich history of those interventions. So whether it's meditation or acupuncture or yoga or even diet, nutrition, and exercise, there is a long-standing wisdom in a lot of these practices. Functional medicine is quite different, and it really does rely a lot on the unvalidated lab testing and increased use of supplements. And while I think some of it has its place, it's not really within my practice. And the reason is that I think it relies on a very similar model to what I don't like about conventional medicine, which is more labs and more pills. So to your point, those sorts of interventions, I think, kind of create some harm, especially in the circumstances that you're alluding to, which is like, I have the secret lab test or I have the secret supplement that nobody else does, and your conventional doctor doesn't want you to know about it. That's not integrative
I have a
medicine.
name for that, by the way. Their own proprietary blend of bullshit.
I concur. Um, you know, I think I think ultimately those situations are more about the individual who's expressing those things than the actual patient and helping the patient get better. So, I once had a conversation with a functional medicine doctor. This was when I was a resident, and I'd never heard of functional medicine, and I just didn't understand it. I was very much in this randomized controlled trial world in my head, and she kept saying things like, "We know this to be true. We know this to be true." And then I would ask her about the data, and she would pull up in vitro models, or she would pull up animal models, and I would say, "Well, so how do we know it to be true?" I wasn't trying to be pedantic. I was like legitimately questioning it. And I think I pissed her off so much that at one point she snaps at me and she goes, "Gary, Functional medicine is all about extrapolated evidence. And if you're not comfortable with that, you're not going to be comfortable with functional medicine. And so it's extrapolated. There is science that's buried there. But if we use extrapolated evidence, and I'm not being hyperbolic about this, turmeric cures HIV, you know, and I can assure you that taking turmeric is not going to cure HIV. I'm sure, you know, one foundation or another would have figured that out by now.
Right.
So, I think that's the balance, right? Is finding things that are accessible and easy for patients, that are less invasive, and sometimes that does mean a supplement or an herb or something like that. But I think the non-pill modalities actually work better and have better evidence for them.
What have you found in particular going along with that? Well, first of all, I want to back up. Number one, thank you for kind of defining those terms and kind of separating that out. On this podcast, I'm very particular about, us using correct terms, correct definitions, and all of that. And I love that you picked that up and defined kind of that difference between integrative medicine and functional medicine. So, first of all, thank you. That's awesome. And then next, with that last statement, what have you kind of found on the integrative side um, that's shown to kind of be of most benefit, has some effectiveness to it or evidence behind it that you kind of routinely implement in your care?
Yeah, so for me, a lot of it's just a lens. It's not the specific intervention itself, right?
Hmm.
So if I'm treating a kid with allergic rhinitis, I'm treating sleep. I'm not treating a stuffy nose. If I'm treating food allergy, I'm looking at what makes up an anti-inflammatory diet. Well, all top nine allergens are important parts of an anti-inflammatory diet. So whether it's soy or grains or tree nuts, those are all really healthy, nutritious foods. So I'm treating a nutritious diet, just like I'm treating asthma for exercise, right? So half of it's the lens and the way you're looking at the patient and the way you're communicating with the patient. For me, I think the mind body interventions are by far, far and away the most effective and the least cost and the least burden to the patient. So those are the ones that I'm using the most.
That's great. I love that. And one of the things that I talk frequently about with patients is I always say, if you're having symptoms, that's your body's communication. It's communicating with us. And the lens that I like to look through in my approach is just understanding what's that communication. And communication goes both ways. There's kind of that sender of the communication, the receiver of the communication, and then how do we interpret that? There's the sending, the receiving, the interpretation, and then how are we going to respond? Um, and that can be very unique for different people. But I always focus on what's the body communicating, and then whatever intervention or therapeutic that we're doing, it's like, how are we interpreting that, and then how are we communicating that back so that we can kind of address whatever the body's communicating. Does that make sense?
No, I love it. And I think our bodies are such clear messengers. How many times
Yeah.
do we hear about the cancer patients who have seen 25 doctors because they weren't feeling right? And then
Right.
finally somebody decided to run the test.
Right.
The more we're tuning into our bodies, the more information we're going to receive. Now we can overdo it, right?
Sure.
We can be so tuned into our body. We know these patients who have really bad mind body disorders, right? Whether
Hmm.
they're used to be called psychosomatic or supratentorial was the obnoxious term that we used to use for it. We know patients that are super tuned into their bodies. So how do we also tune that up in certain ways, and how do we tune it down in certain ways?
Yeah. Very good. One of the things that I find a lot of perhaps doctors in general, I'm just talking in general now, we work in a very broken system. And by that broken system, I mean, we're, spending time and communicating with a patient and listening to a patient and validating a patient and working on some of these lifestyle measures or integrative, measures, that doesn't get rewarded, and at all. In fact, it's kind of quite the opposite, where it's, we live in a system where it's very time and volume driven, very test and procedure driven. And how have you kind of been able to fit that in, because you're doing a great job of kind of working with the patient, listening, validating, implementing some of the, the integrative medicine. But at the end of the day, you still have to do that in the context of the system by which we're dealt. And how have you kind of found, any kind of techniques that you've learned to um, make it work for you?
Yeah, I mean, again, it goes back to that idea of a lens, right? It's in
Hmm.
simple communication techniques. So again, when I'm asking patients about stuffy noses, do you wake up tired in the morning? Do you feel well rested?
Yeah,
By the end of the day, are you completely drained? That's a whole different conversation than every time you're around a dog, do you get itchy eyes and sneezing? Patients resonate with it differently. They hear it differently.
sure.
When I talk to kids about their food allergies, I'm also talking about their food allergy anxiety,
Yeah,
right? Because this is a chronic illness that's impacting them in such a meaningful psychological way. Um, they hear that. I've even
yeah,
told parents, I've even told parents, what are you doing to take care of yourself? Are you talking to somebody?
yeah.
Because they're so burdened by that. So really simple questions that show up but really connect to patients are important priorities in how I care for somebody.
That's awesome. And probably because of the questions that you're honing in on, you're getting better answers. I don't mean better, but probably more informative answers than just kind of that surface level question of, do you get itchy around your dog, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And richer connections too, right? Like these
Yeah,
are, and it's more, it's not just them. It's so much more fulfilling for me as a
sure.
physician to not show up as like a repetitive robot. And I'll tell
Yeah,
you, there are days where I am the repetitive robot just because I'm on autopilot, because we all go through that as human beings. And those are
yeah,
the least fulfilling days for me.
sure. That's awesome. So by implementing this, you're able to get that greater fulfillment within yourself, but then that energy is going to translate down to what your patients are feeling as well, and kind of that
And
connection with you.
and I'll also say this for my so I have a separate oncology clinic that's strictly integrative medicine. I get an hour long for a new visit, and I get a half hour
Wow.
for a follow up. And so I
Wow.
really get to spend some meaningful time with patients, and that alone creates human connection in a way that they may not feel with their oncologist who only has that 20 minutes to see them.
Sure. That's awesome. Um, so what do you see kind of as medicine evolves, as the world kind of evolves? What are some of the biggest challenges that we're facing, and how, what are kind of some key ways that you think we can overcome those?
I think the politicization, I'm not sure I'm saying that word right, but I feel like I got it, of
Political
medicine,
polarity.
the political polarity of medicine that's sort of entered the paradigm is one of the greatest threats. But I think it's also an overstated threat. There was a great paper that just came out of Kaiser earlier this year about people who identify as Maha versus not Maha. And if you actually look at the paper, we're not that far apart.
Yeah.
Like we share a
Okay.
lot of similar values, we share a lot of similar concerns, and so we're not that separate. But what I do see is that in some of the larger societies, organizations that oversee medicine, they're driving that polarity. They're driving that division as much as the other side is. And I think the
Yeah.
biggest mistake that we're making is A, not saying, how did we lose so many people? Like, what did we do to go wrong? but
Yeah.
also how do we reach them again instead of digging our heels in on certain pieces of all of this?
Yeah. And that's amazing because with that polarity too, I love your point in that there's probably a lot more similarities than differences in both groups. But the way social media is structured is it's going to put a microphone or a megaphone on those loud extremes. And so we may get this incorrect perception that there's more differences than there are similarities. And I like how you kind of bring that together and focusing more on what really makes us similar.
That's my goal. I had a post yesterday that started with two things can be true at once.
Yeah.
And the amount of positive feedback just by starting a post by saying that was really surprising. But really spoke to maybe there's a move here. Maybe people are really starting to feel that it's time to start considering everybody else's feeling. Just to your point exactly, when we started this was just getting on the phone with somebody
Yeah.
and just being able to talk. All of a
Yeah.
sudden they become a reasonable human being.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. And I love your post of two things can be true at once, because what'll happen is when people are trying to polarize or promote the one thing or the hidden thing or the secret thing, it kind of goes against nuance. It goes
Mm-hmm.
against detail. And it's usually when you dive into the details and the nuance, that's when you do see that two things actually can be true at once and things can kind of
Right.
coexist. And so that's interesting. When you were talking though, I've thought about this for a couple of years, and I've actually I don't even think I've ever verbalized this publicly, but um a couple of years ago, I had an opportunity within about a 2 week period of time to go around the world, like literally travel, because I had four speaking engagements on, I don't know, I think three or four different continents. I can't remember, but it literally took me around the world, and it was quick. But I was in Australia, I was in Egypt, I was in Jordan, I was in Italy, I was in Germany, and then back to the States. And through that, I was talking to so many people. And, it was primarily about food allergy. And what was crazy is I started reflecting on that because I have friends of both Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, Russia, you all over Europe. And if you take it a step further, I have friends who are Jews and Muslims and Catholics and Protestants and atheists and all walks of life, like all across the board. And the one thing that connected me with all of these people is food allergy. and and the thing of it is the similarities amongst everyone, amongst everyone was astounding. And it gets back to your point of the Maha versus non Maha and the similarities that were there. And it's like, it didn't matter who I was talking to or who I was presenting to. It didn't matter, what their cultural or ethnic or religious background was. They all wanted the same thing. They all were in search of kind of that same thing. And I get along with all of them. Like I have compassion on all of them. And again, it focuses in on, sometimes we see so many things that are divisions, but we hear just those loud polarizing voices. And we tend to lose sight of the commonality amongst us and the beauty amongst us, where there's a whole lot that can be said. I guess getting back to my original story, there's a whole lot that can be said when you just can have a talk with somebody who, when we started the conversation, you would have thought me and the insurance guy were probably on opposite sides. But we focused in on that commonality of the needs of the patient. And we had a discussion where we could share our points, and then we came to, an agreement, and we focused in on some of that, and there was so much that got accomplished, and I think so much of that is lost because that is not glorified on social media or the algorithms. So
No, I mean, for me, I think it was such a gift to be able to go to medical school in Israel and see exactly
yeah,
what you're talking about in real life.
I bet.
You know, there was no division in the hospital. There was no separation. I worked with Muslim doctors, I worked with Muslim nurses, I worked with
Yeah,
Jewish doctors, Jewish nurses, Christian, across the board. Even many, visitors from places like Africa. You know,
yeah,
when people ask me how I went from music to medicine, the most simple answer is humanity, right? We all
yeah,
they're two of the things that probably connect humanity the most is music and their health and our well-being, right?
yeah,
And it is that simple. You get us in a room together, we start asking each other questions, we start understanding each other.
yeah,
The game changes entirely. The algorithm isn't built for that, right? That doesn't keep us
right,
engaged. I,
right,
I always think about this story of a Tibetan monk who was imprisoned in China for decades, and they asked him his greatest fear while he was imprisoned, and he said it was losing compassion for my captors. Like,
wow,
what a beautiful concept that is. And I wish
yeah,
we all held that in the algorithm, which is like maintaining compassion for people we disagree with.
yeah,
It's fun. We probably shouldn't talk too much politics, but I went to I you know I'm very against a lot of the decisions this administration has made. Like, fundamentally, it's painful to watch for me.
sure, sure,
But I went with Jared Kushner to Auschwitz and toured the camps with Jared Kushner. And I posted about, at the time, I found Jared to be a wonderful, kind, loving human being. That was my
hmm,
experience with him.
sure,
And the pushback I got for seeing the humanity in somebody that I fundamentally disagree with on many levels,
sure,
the pushback that I got on Facebook for that was wild. But if we
yeah,
have the conversation in human, I'm not going to get the same pushback because you're going to understand what I'm saying. You're going to understand where I'm coming from. I guess my question to you is, how do we perpetuate this on social media? Because I'm doing my best to find middle ground in my posts,
yeah,
but you're also working at it too.
hmm, yeah. It's funny. I was literally just thinking we should create a social media platform that has an algorithm that promotes this kind of story and downgrades the polarity nonsense myth shit that we deal with, and see how that does. Where the algorithm promotes, you know, the commonality, the compassion, and the beauty amongst us, um, because it's often, you see what you're looking for, and that's very much, when you're on social media now. I think the main thing is, um, for me, I just have to keep trying. Like, sometimes it seems like a daunting task, uh, but within me, it's like, if I think I can, I have like the biggest social media following or whatever. It's like, I don't care if I can impact one person and feel good about what I'm doing. Looking in the mirror, feeling good about what I'm doing in the process, then that's worth it. It's worth it to me. And it kind of gets back to even just how you practice medicine every day, of being able to get into, you know those deeper questions, looking at it through a different lens, being able to connect with that human on a certain level, that gives you that personal satisfaction, but you're also able to connect and gain that trust of that other human as well. And I think for me, it's to just constantly looking at people as people, not numbers, not statistics, not things or objects, but as humans and as people. And I always say, like, just from like a business standpoint, I don't ever want it to feel transactional. I always want it to feel like it's relational. And I try to live that every day. But I think the more that we can kind of come together and find like-minded and combat kind of the nonsense that's out there, um, we'll see where it goes. I don't know if I have any
Yeah, I mean,
answers other than I can just account for me and those in my circle of influence.
I think so much of the trick and where we went wrong for so long as physicians is losing that service mentality. And
Hmm.
granted, it's been beaten out of us too, right?
It
But
has.
this mindset that you're going to go out and make millions of dollars as a physician, and you're going to walk into your community and be celebrated as the town doc, that's gone, and it's no more, and it's not something that we can attach ourselves to. Buddhism
Yeah.
and yoga talk a lot about attachment, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of doctors have this attachment to like how I should be treated, how I should be respected. And I'm not saying they're not deserving of respect, but it's not a guarantee, it's not a
Right.
promise. And I think if we can walk into rooms with patients and say, how can I be in service to this human being, it just sets a completely different tone. I always joke
Yeah.
I learned more about being a doctor waiting tables for 10 years than I ever did in medical school.
Yeah. For sure. Um, Tell me a little more about that. What did you learn?
What did I learn? That it's not
Yeah.
always going to go your way, and you're not there for you, you
Yeah.
know. I think little things really really make a big difference too. I had customers cry in front of me. I had because they were having a terrible day and I brought them a little piece of cake.
Yeah.
Or I had customers share their health status with me, not because I knew anything about medicine or was even planning on going into medicine at that point, but because you want to create a space for people to feel comfortable and open. A meal is a sacred thing, right? Even if it was at Dave and Buster's and Bennigan's, which is where I worked, but it's still a sacred moment. Like you're putting your trust into somebody to come bring you the thing that you're going to sustain yourself with.
Yeah.
It may feel like I'm overstating it, but for a lot of people, I'm not. They've saved up money to go out for this big meal. They're doing it with somebody that they love. They're doing it with somebody that's special to them. And really being there for that moment, just like when a patient comes into our clinic, they are already feeling vulnerable. They're already feeling shaken. How many young parents do you have walk into your office with their newborn baby who's getting rashes, and you're like, this is just a rash. This isn't anything more than like a simple rash. Use some moisturizer and we're good. But in that moment, they're telling you so much more, right? They're telling you,
Yeah.
I'm scared as a new parent. I don't know what I'm doing as a new parent. Every sneeze, every cough, every rash could mean anything to me because I have no
Yeah.
idea. And I think being in that service mentality and showing up for them and their needs and what they're really asking in that moment goes a lot farther.
That's awesome. In fact, your concept of like the the sacredness of the meal and the importance of the meal is actually a good part of what drove me years and years ago to get so much into food allergy, because that is such a big part of so many's lives, family events, holidays, all the things. And when it's far more than just about eating the food. It's all the other things that surround it, and that's probably the most important lesson I've learned over the years in treating these food allergy families is the all the other aspects that go along with the meal, more so than whether they can partake of it or not. Just the ability to sit at the table and feel comfortable and safe and secure and included in that table. Tremendous amount in
One of
terms
one
of.
of the greatest social psychology models is Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
And I actually teach my residents using Maslow's hierarchy of needs just to explain what food allergy is, because that's exactly it. It's about safety and security. It's about
Hmm.
belonging. It's
Yeah.
about, self-identity. It hits
Yes.
so many of these human principles that extend way, way beyond whether or not you can eat a peanut.
Yes. Yeah. My motto is make food allergy families eat again.
Me too. I like that.
All right, man. Thank you so much. This has really been an impactful, enlightening conversation. Feel even more connected with you. I think we've been able to feed the audience quite a bit of information. Before we go on this program, it's the immune edit, because instead of like pearls or pearls of the day, I like to leave the audience with what's maybe one, two, or three edits that they can make in their pursuit of health and healing, um, in their progression. What are maybe two or three things that you would suggest as people as they face so many challenges, so many struggles in life? From your perspective, what are two or three things that they could do?
Yeah, so very little simple interventions. So I love the idea of journaling. You write down
Yes.
three things you're grateful for at the end of the day. Not only does it make you feel good, there's actually data that it can improve some asthma symptoms as well. There's
Mm.
actually data that it improves cardiovascular symptoms. So not only is this a great feel good intervention, but there's physiological data to support it. Another intervention that I love is getting out into nature, going outside, exposing yourself to the sunlight and the trees. And a couple of things are going on. First of all, you're getting away from your screens, you're getting outside, you're breathing fresh air. But then if you want to get into the science, and we're going to extrapolate a little bit, is plants are releasing chemicals. They're releasing these volatile organic compounds that we're breathing in that may actually impact our immunity, that may impact how we're feeling. And then, of course, a good night's sleep, right? Rest is so important. And part of that, again, is a simple intervention like using intranasal corticosteroids, right? If we have
Hmm.
to use a very conventional intervention to get us to the point of what is integrative care, that's integrative. That's what we do.
Yeah.
We bring it all together. So I think those are
Awesome.
three solid ones.
That's awesome. Amazing, amazing takeaways for everyone. Gary, appreciate you. Appreciate your perspective and all the insights that you shared with us today. And look forward to seeing you soon.
I appreciate you having me on. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about it, Doug.
Take care. Thank you so much again for tuning in. We'll see you next time on The Immune Edit. This show is separate from my clinical practice at Global Allergy Immune Network. This show represents my opinions and my guests' opinions. Neither myself nor the show endorses the views or statements of my guests. This show is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. This show is provided with the understanding that it does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. If you're looking for help in your journey, please seek out a qualified medical practitioner. It's important to have someone in your corner who is a trained and licensed healthcare practitioner who can help you make changes, especially when it comes to your health.